Hey, Scott Jordan and Mark Warner here for Jancast number 176 for Thursday, September 19th, 2024. And hello, Mark. How's it going today?
It's
Oh.
good. I saw you actually had to give some thought to that 2024 thing. More amazingly is how much time has passed and how we're actually looking at summer in the rearview mirror now.
Yeah, and we got two Marks on this show. But before that, before we get into that, then you can do your official intro. Don't forget, folks, if you saw the last Jancast, the question is, are we going to have an F1 car in the booth at the ISSA or not? And by the way, if you are going to the show, don't forget our booth number, which is 3853. We will be there, and you have to come by and see if the F1 car is there or not.
Do we
So there
want
you
to tell
go.
them about the raffle? The
The raffle
raffle as
for the
to who
car?
can guess who is driving the F1 car.
Yep. Yep. So we'll just have to wait and see. But Mark, why don't you go into the detail on the excellent guest that we have today?
Yeah, I'm actually humbled and quite honored to be able to introduce Mr. Mark Drozdov. Mark, it's wonderful to have you on the program. I'd like to tell the listeners a little bit about you. I mean, my involvement with you happened with the S410 infection control for the built environment, which was the standards committee that was developed right around the beginning of COVID, right after the March 2020 shutdown of the world. It became rather apparent that although healthcare itself had a lot of standards regarding infection control, the commercial built environment outside of healthcare really didn't have any real specific standards to shoot for. So I know you and I got engaged with that. You are the vice chair of that committee, and we had Graham Dick on a previous program, and I know that's something that you and I and Graham and everybody that's on the consensus body are pretty proud of. So I wanted to put that out there right up front because that's how you and I got hooked up. I know our listeners would love to know that you're the executive vice president of Lozier Incorporated. You're an adjunct professor at the Cooper Union for Advancement of Science and Art. You're an adjunct professor at Rutgers University School of Public Health. You're an adjunct professor at the Stevens Institute of Technology. I mean, that alone is a mouthful for me
How
to
many
even
how many
say.
clones, Mark, how many clones do you have of yourself to be able to do all that stuff?
My
You've
wife
also
said,
figured out
not
cloning
enough,
human beings.
right? Not enough.
The other thing is, I don't know how you find the time, but you're also on the board of directors and vice president of the IICRC itself. And that's certainly got some serious time involvement to do that. I know you're a standards chair in the American Society of Safety Professionals, president of Astra Partners, and past president of the American Hygiene Association, which is
Just a couple more.
fascinating. Yeah. So, and then past president of the New York University's Polytechnic School, or past director rather, of the New York University's Polytechnic School of Engineering. And I know you have an engineering background, but I also know that you have used a phrase that was somewhat new to me. So we all talk about the term indoor air quality and IAQ all the time. And the other day you said, "What about IEQ?" And I was like, "Wait, what? What's IEQ?" So I was wondering if you could kind of give us a little clue on where IEQ came from.
Um, well, thank you for having me. And I enjoy talking about my work. I enjoy talking about the topics, anything indoor environmental quality, indoor air quality, environmental health and safety. This is I live in that world, and you know I enjoy exploring anything and everything about the topic. To answer your question, Mark, the Indoor Environmental Quality Global Alliance is an international organization where I represent IICRC on the board of directors, and we meet regularly and discuss various issues that affect the environment of the indoors. The last meeting we had was in conjunction with ASHRAE, and ASHRAE conventions are widely attended, thousands and thousands of people, and that also shows how active the industry is. Also, I wanted to mention that when it comes to IICRC, I'm proud to be on the board of directors, and in addition to Mark, you and I serving on the infection control standard development referred to as S410, I'm also involved with the S530, which is the mode assessment standard in development, as well as health and safety field guide, also in development. And when it comes to standards, I think that we all in the industry benefit from understanding what is the best practice, learn from mistakes that we've, done in the past. And by now, when we get those gray hairs, we feel the responsibility to share the lessons learned. One more thing I wanted to mention is that, today, in September, we just had the anniversary of 9/11, where the term contaminants of concern was originated. And, out of 300 and more of contaminants that we tested for post 9/11, and I was in ground zero day in and day out, for the restoration effort. I'm very proud of it. We came up with this acronym, PALMS, which stands for PCBs, asbestos, lead, mold, and silica, PALMS. And it's kind of putting the contaminants of concern in the palm of your hand. Since then, it expanded to also include the pandemic concerns, the PFACs, the arsenic, Legionella, metals, heavy metals, that is, safety and sustainability. So nowadays, the PALMS acronym, and somebody at IICRC told me, yeah, you have two palms, Mark. So, we have a lot of contaminants to deal with.
You have five more letters that you can include, right? With palms and do a few more. What's fascinating about all that to me, Mark, is we had Dinesh Wadhwani on a program earlier and Dr. Charles Gerba. And in those conversations, it was interesting in talking about how contaminants interact between the air and surfaces.
Yeah.
And things that are in the air can end up populating surfaces, and things that are on surfaces through the mere act of cleaning sometimes can be broadcast back up into the air. And so that interrelationship is been something that's relatively new. It's something that I think we all wish we would have paid attention to prior to COVID, but COVID certainly drove that point home.
True. And, again, coming back to the palms of, the contaminants of concern, certain contaminants, and I lecture on that quite often, certain contaminants, to verify if the area is okay for reoccupancy, we base that decision either on air test or on the surface test. And depending on the contaminant, that would vary.
I remember one of the things that we were having fun discussing with Dr. Gerba was his studies on, have you heard of the toilet plume effect? So it was all about what gets broadcast when a toilet is flushed, and we had listeners calling in saying, I didn't know I needed to store my
pretty scary
toothbrush
stuff.
3 feet away from the toilet, So, and it reinforced in a comical way that there is this interaction, that things can be expelled into the air through different things that we do, not only cleaning. I know that you mentioned to me that in the state of New York, anybody involved with, well, cleaning is one end of it, but anybody involved with construction, building refurb, new construction in healthcare has to be certified in a completely different area than I was familiar with. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for bringing that up. I live in New York City. If I were to open my window right now, you would hear ambulances and the fire department and the NYPD sirens. But the fact is, when we are in healthcare, any kind of renovation, any kind of effort of doing construction work, cleaning work, any kind of disturbance in a healthcare hospital environments, in New York City, you could not step your foot in any of the buildings of the healthcare without the infection control risk assessment, the ICRA certification. And this is very important because a lot of the construction trades, have to be educated. It's a level up on how to behave, what to watch out for. And it's all about risk. How do you mitigate the risk? Recognizing it is very important. And then how do you contain any potential for dust dispersion, or making sure that, the healthy people don't get affected by the sick people. And that's what hospitals are full of.
Yeah. Is there any push to have similar regulations put in place in other states? I'm surprised California doesn't have it already in place.
And I want to clarify, it's not a regulation. It's a requirement.
Oh, okay.
Different entities controlling the work and the insurance, payments in the healthcare. That's where it comes from. But it's also something that I mentioned before. It's the state of the art, and everybody's, getting better and better at the work that we're doing. So keeping surfaces clean, keeping the air clean, using the right containments, filtration, work practices. That's what it's about.
What do you think that could end up at some point migrating into the cleaning industry? I know that there's been studies that show the act of cleaning and disinfection can actually disrupt the air temporarily while it's taking place, and something Graham had talked about. Do you think not a regulation, but a requirement like that might end up being something the cleaning industry would face rather than just the construction industry?
It's already the case here in New York. As I mentioned, if there's any disturbance of anything or a risk of disturbance, this requirement comes into play.
Gotcha. So it also is completely relevant to cleaning departments, the executive housekeepers, and staff within hospitals in New York. Yeah, so I remember when you were talking about that in the S410 meeting, I was fascinated by that, Mark. And again, why I always call you like my go-to guru for all things like this, and I do appreciate it. I know several months ago, I actually reached out for you for help with someone who had reached out to me for clarification on lead and lead gold requirements. And you were immensely helpful on that. And that's something else that you do in your spare time. I was going to ask you, when is your spare time? From 2 a.m. to 4 a.m.? Because you keep your plate pretty full, man.
Yeah.
People have hobbies, they play golf or tennis. Work is my hobby. So my wife has repeatedly told me that I failed at retirement. I've retired several times, but failed at it. So I'm in it. When it comes to lead, and this is for buildings, for infrastructure, I also work with something referred to as Envision, very similar, sustainability, green standards, making things healthier and better for the future generations. The point is, with LEED credits, the indoor air quality is one of those credits, and I'm again proud of being part of a number of LEED certification projects. One in particular, right up in Harlem, where we achieved gold certification. We had to go and prove that the indoor air quality meets the requirements of LEED and gain those points. So, you know, it's all about clean and cleanliness and keeping it so.
Good. Wow. Hey, I should have asked this question at the beginning of the show, but we're getting close to closing out, and I don't want to leave it hanging in my mind. So how did you end up getting in this line of business that you're obviously intensely involved in?
Well, that would take more, Scott, than 2 minutes that we have left.
Give me
But
the elevator
I
pitch.
started in the business working in construction, got into the environmental remediation field here in New York City. I then took a job in Pittsburgh. And my wife said to me after a while, you know, there's no Wall Street in Pittsburgh, so we had to move. But the fact is, I did a lot of Superfund remediation work, investigation for environmental hazards all over the country, all over the world. When I did come back to New York City from my tour of duty all over the country, I opened my own consulting firm, which in 2016 was acquired by the British Standards Institution, BSI. And this is the time that I almost retired. Well, I did retire, and then I failed at doing so. So you know, it's a lifelong passion for me.
Yeah, great.
Mark, I thought you were going to say, like, when you were like 5 years old, you were preoccupied with like infectious disease control and prevention or something, but you started a little later than that, I think. Right? It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Mark, I got to tell you how grateful I am to have you involved with this Jancast.com episode. Really, really very grateful, very appreciative of your friendship. So,
and we'll put in the show notes how people can get in touch with you as well. But yeah, thanks a lot for joining us. It's a very interesting subject. And I can only imagine hanging out with you in a cocktail party.
Yes, yes. Must have some vodka there though.
For hand sanitizer, right?
We can use it either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn, as Mark mentioned before. My name is on the screen.
Okay.
Pleasure to be here, and please be safe, and I will talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Bye-bye.